Working hard makes you rich.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the great American promise, isn't it?
I mean, you put in the hours, you grind, you do everything right. So, why does it feel like you are running on a treadmill that just keeps speeding up?
Because it is. It's not your imagination. The treadmill is actively accelerating.
Right. Over the last 50 years, global wealth has just absolutely exploded. I mean, we are surrounded by more money, more technology, and, more mind-bending efficiency than at any point in human history. Yet, middle-class anxiety is at an all-time high.
Oh, absolutely.
You feel it?
Yeah.
I feel it. Everyone listening to this feels it. You are producing more value than ever, but you're not getting wealthier.
You're just getting busier. You're getting more stressed.
And here is the absolute slap in the face.
Yeah.
This reality you're living in. It's not an accident. This is not some natural, organic evolution of the free market.
No. It is a highly, highly engineered system.
Exactly. You are living inside a 50-year-old operating system, like an invisible mathematical code that dictates your salary, your stress levels, and honestly, whether your entire department gets outsourced next Tuesday.
Yeah. And today, in this deep dive, we are exposing that source code.
We have the actual blueprints. We're diving into a massive stack of sources today. We've got historical business archives, university textbooks, declassified internal consulting memos.
The gold mine.
It really is. And we're leaning heavily on Walter Kiechel's incredible book, The Lords of Strategy. We're going to track down a tiny, ruthless group of elite consultants who essentially invented modern business.
We are going to decode the matrix. And once you see the code, you will never look at your job the same way again.
So let's jump right in. Let's unpack this reality dilemma. Why does busy equal poor?
Well, it starts with a concept we need to call the fiercening of capitalism.
The fiercening? Man, that sounds brutal.
Because it is brutal. If you look at the raw economic data, for decades after World War II, society's wealth grew. And the middle class grew right alongside it. It was like a parallel track.
Right.
But then right around the 1970s, a wedge was violently driven between the two.
Picture a graph in your head, right? Middle-class anxiety is a line going straight up. And wealth concentrating at the very top is another thick line, also going straight up.
Yeah. Productivity skyrocketed, but wages basically stagnated.
Why? Did the rules of the market just, magically change?
No, the game itself was changed. A new breed of corporate elites literally invented strategy. They took business, which used to be a practical trade, and turned it into a lethal mathematical weapon.
And the first guy to really pull the trigger was a man named Bruce Henderson.
Right, the legendary founder of the Boston Consulting Group, BCG.
So Henderson looks at the corporate world and makes this chilling decision. He decides he only wants to hire the absolute top 5% of elite scholars.
The smartest, most ruthlessly logical people in the room.
He actually placed ads at Harvard Business School saying he only wanted the absolute top tier, like no regular folks allowed.
Exactly. And by doing this, he created a massive, permanent intellectual wall. He completely separated the thinkers from the doers.
Oh, wait, let me push back on this a little bit. Wasn't business always a ruthless food chain? I mean, guys like John D. Rockefeller and Henry Ford weren't exactly handing out hugs. They were brutal.
True. But their ruthlessness was, it was raw, it was intuitive, it was just one guy at the top making gut decisions.
Okay, so how is this new thing different?
This new strategy revolution was systemic. It was cold, calculated, and entirely mathematical.
It feels like, we used to play neighborhood basketball. It was rough, sure. You cut an elbow now and then. But suddenly someone brought in an NBA analytics team.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And that analytics team mathematically proved that only 3 specific players should ever touch the ball.
And everyone else.
Everyone else is just there to set screens and take elbows to the face. You're out there sweating, wondering why you never get to shoot. It's because the math explicitly says you shouldn't.
That is a perfect analogy. The thinkers sit at the top, looking at the analytics. The doers, the middle managers, the factory workers, the sales reps are just numbers on those spreadsheets.
Interchangeable cogs.
Right. The strategy revolution created a world where a tiny group of masterminds reaps the rewards of extreme efficiency. Everyone else is just a cost to be managed.
So if you feel anxious at work, that daily workplace stress is actually the direct byproduct of a consultant's mathematical model from the 1960s.
Yeah. But who actually wrote this code? To understand the matrix, we have to look at the world right before it was built.
The era of flying blind.
The end of naked intuition.
Let me ask you this. You think Henry Ford or Rockefeller had a master plan? The historical sources tell a completely different, almost hilarious story.
They did not have a strategy at all.
Before 1960, the word strategy barely even existed in corporate boardrooms. It was strictly a military term.
Companies didn't have strategies. They had what the archives call extrapolated plans.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning, we made $1 million last year. Let's try to make $1 million plus 10% this year.
That is insane. These were massive global empires.
But they were clueless. Clueless about their actual competitive environment. I mean, they were arrogant. Look at Henry Ford II. He famously dismissed Japanese cars arriving in America as little shitboxes.
He actually said that. On the record, he totally ignored the threat.
Because companies back then lacked a rigorous understanding of the 3 Cs.
The 3 Cs. Break that down. How basic are we talking?
Costs.
Customers.
Competitors.
I mean, that sounds like business 101.
It sounds basic to us now because we live in the matrix they built, but back then, it was revolutionary. Companies literally did not know their own costs relative to their competitors.
Hold on. How is that even mathematically possible? You have accountants, you have ledgers. How do you not know your costs?
Because they believed in a massive fallacy. They believed your costs are your costs. Meaning, if you build cars and your rival builds cars, you both buy steel on the open market. You both pay union wages. You both pay for electricity. Therefore, management assumed your base costs must be roughly the same.
They assumed everyone was operating on a level playing field.
Exactly. It was an era of pure intuition. You ran your business based on gut feelings, historical momentum, and, personal relationships.
So you're telling me massive corporate empires were built entirely on gut feelings? That is terrifying. That's like a pilot flying a massive 747 commercial jet strictly by looking out the side window.
No instrument panel, no radar.
Just squinting and hoping they don't hit a mountain in the fog.
This era of flying blind was begging to be disrupted.
And it was violently disrupted by a man who proudly claimed he could not keep a job to save his life.
Enter the maverick, Bruce Henderson.
The revenge of the fired. I love this part. How does a man who proudly gets fired from almost every job he ever holds end up writing the fundamental rules for global capitalism?
By refusing to accept that business was just a trade. He didn't see it as a gentleman's club. He saw it as a puzzle, like a complex interlocking code that needed to be cracked.
Let's look at his history. He was vice president at Westinghouse, a massive, prestigious company, and he gets fired. Again.
So in 1963, he decides to go out on his own. He starts the Boston Consulting Group, BCG.
Picture this setup. It's not some glamorous high-rise. It is one room, one desk, no telephone.
Just Bruce Henderson sitting there.
But Henderson had something no one else in the corporate world had.
Right. He was completely obsessed with Darwinian anthropology and microeconomics. He looked at the corporate world and realized everyone was sleepwalking.
Give me a specific example. What did Henderson see that the old guard CEOs were entirely missing?
Well, go back to his time at Westinghouse. They were selling small electric motors. Henderson, being obsessed with data, actually crunched the numbers. And he noticed they were selling these motors at a massive loss. They were bleeding money on every single unit they shipped.
Why would a massive publicly traded company intentionally sell a product at a loss?
When Henderson asked management, they said it was for cultural reasons.
Cultural reasons? What does that even mean?
They felt they needed to offer a full line of products just to look like a serious, dominant company. It was pure ego.
We have to make small motors or we won't look like the big, tough Westinghouse.
Exactly. But Henderson looked closer. He analyzed a smaller competitor named Leland Electric. Leland was selling the exact same small motors at the exact same market price, but Leland was making a massive profit.
Wait, how? If the price is the same and the product is the same, how is the smaller guy making money while the giant is bleeding?
That was the puzzle, and the answer was chilling. Henderson realized that Westinghouse had absolutely no idea what they were doing. They did not understand the underlying mathematical systems of their own market. Leland had optimized their entire factory strictly for small motors. Westinghouse was treating them as an afterthought.
So Henderson decides to invent the concept of corporate strategy out of thin air to explain this exact phenomenon.
It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? The most powerful tool for corporate insiders was invented by the ultimate corporate outsider, a rebel, a guy who completely failed at playing corporate politics.
He didn't want to play their game. He wanted to invent a brand new game. And his first massive breakthrough wasn't a philosophy. It wasn't a motivational speech.
No, it was a weapon, a lethal mathematical superweapon.
We call it the experience curve.
The iron law of dropping costs.
This is where the story gets terrifying for anyone running a business. We all know the phrase bigger is better. But why is being the biggest player in a market not just a nice advantage? Why is it the absolute mathematical only way to survive?
Because of the math Henderson uncovered. In 1966, BCG took an old aviation concept called the learning curve and upgraded it into an absolute monster.
Let's explain the learning curve first. It's simple, right? The more you do something, the faster you get at it. If I build one birdhouse, it takes me 5 hours. If I build my 100th birdhouse, it takes me 20 minutes.
Right. It applies to physical labor on a factory floor. But BCG applied this logic to the entire organization. Every single cost on the ledger, capital, administration, research and development, marketing, sales.
They expanded the concept from the guy swinging the hammer to the entire corporate structure.
And when they charted the data, they discovered a terrifying mathematical truth.
Hit me with the truth.
Every time a company's accumulated production volume doubles, its total costs systematically drop by 15 to 25%.
Wait, every single time?
Every single time. If you chart it on a double logarithmic scale, it is a straight line down. It is an iron law of economics.
Okay, let's translate this into everyday reality. What does this mean for two companies fighting it out in a market?
It's an absolute death sentence for the smaller company. Think about the mechanics. The company with the largest market share has, by definition, produced the most accumulated volume.
Right. If you have 60% of the market, you've made the most widgets.
Therefore, according to the experience curve, they mathematically must have the lowest costs in the entire industry.
Because their volume has doubled more times than anyone else. They are the undisputed king of cheap.
Yes. And here is where it gets lethal. If they keep growing their market share, their costs keep dropping. They build a permanent, compounding, unbeatable advantage. They can lower their retail prices to a point where you, the smaller competitor, are bleeding money on every single sale while they are still making a massive profit margin.
This is insane. It's like a video game. You're fighting a boss. But every time you hit the boss, instead of taking damage, the boss gets 20% more armor.
And a bigger weapon.
If you aren't the boss, you are dead. You cannot win a battle of attrition against the experience curve.
You cannot win. The math forbids it. The strategic takeaway was blunt. You must get big or you must get out.
That is a brutal reality check. And this theory looked perfect on a whiteboard. It looked like magic.
But when companies actually took this weapon out of the boardroom and into the real world, the results were, well, completely chaotic. It was a roller coaster of blood and money.
Real combat. Let's look at two companies from the sources. They both read the BCG memos. They both use the exact same superweapon, the experience curve. One company conquers the world. The other throws itself into a $16 million meat grinder.
Why the difference? Because strategy isn't just a clean spreadsheet. It involves unpredictable human fear and irrational human stubbornness.
Let's start with the winner. Black & Decker, the tool company.
Black & Decker understood the weapon perfectly. They looked at their core product, circular saws. At the time, they were selling these saws for around $35. They wanted to completely dominate the market, so they made a radical move. They proactively dropped the price.
Wait, they dropped the price before their costs actually went down?
Yes, they dropped it all the way down to $19.95.
That is a massive price cut. You're essentially giving away the profit margin. What happened?
Their sales volume instantly doubled. Consumers bought them like crazy.
And because the accumulated volume doubled, the experience curve violently kicked in. Their actual production costs plummeted.
Exactly. The math worked. They made their money back and then some. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was psychological.
Explain that.
Competitors like Stanley Tools looked at that $19.95 price tag on the shelf. They did the math based on their own much higher production costs.
And Stanley Tools said, Black & Decker must be losing a fortune on every sale. We aren't touching that market. It's financial suicide.
Stanley Tools literally walked away. Black & Decker terrified them off the battlefield. They secured a total, undisputed monopoly on that segment.
Perfect execution. You drop the price, you force the volume, you ride the curve down, and you scare the enemy into surrendering. Now, let's look at the loser. Texas Instruments.
Texas Instruments tried the exact same playbook with personal calculators. They wanted to trigger the experience curve. They aggressively dropped prices down to $10 a calculator.
Which was incredibly cheap back then. Calculators used to be luxury items.
They expected competitors to look at that price, panic, and run away, just like Stanley Tools did.
But they didn't run.
No. A major competitor named Bomar refused to blink. Bomar matched the price cuts penny for penny, and then other competitors jumped in too.
Here is the slap in the face. The experience curve only works if you actually scare the other guy off. If they don't run away, you haven't secured market share. You've just triggered a horrific industry-wide price war.
It was a complete bloodbath. The entire industry's profit margins collapsed to zero. Bomar fought so stubbornly that they went completely bankrupt, and Texas Instruments lost $16 million in a single quarter.
It is a giant game of chicken.
Yeah.
Black & Decker drove a tank onto the highway, and everyone else got out of the way. Texas Instruments drove a tank onto the highway, but everyone else brought tanks too.
And they all just sat there and blew each other up.
So price wars are incredibly dangerous. If you want to fund this massive aggressive growth to ride the experience curve down, but you absolutely want to avoid triggering a bankrupting price war, where do you get the cash to expand?
You break the fundamental rules of traditional finance.
Debt magic, the sustainable growth formula.
Every traditional college textbook tells you that debt is dangerous. Debt is a liability. It is risky. You should minimize it.
The BCG looked at their clients and said, forget the textbooks. Borrow massive amounts of money or get the hell out of the industry.
This specific revelation was the brainchild of a BCG financial genius named Alan Zakon.
Zakon was analyzing the timber industry, right? A massive company called Weyerhaeuser.
Yes. Weyerhaeuser was acting very conservative, very old school. They were actively paying down their debt, but their competitors were buying up forest land like crazy. They were borrowing heavily from the banks to do it, and they were getting incredibly rich.
Why wasn't the massive debt crushing the competitors?
Zakon figured it out. He looked at the underlying nature of the business. Timber is an incredibly low-risk business. Trees just grow. You don't have to invent a new microchip every 6 months. The operational risk is nearly zero.
Okay, so trees are safe. What does that have to do with debt?
Zakon realized a massive, completely counterintuitive truth. In a low operational risk business, you actually must jack up your financial risk. You must take on massive amounts of debt.
Wait, I need you to explain this to me like I'm 5.
Yeah.
Because at the time, academia worshipped the Modigliani-Miller theorem.
Right. Modigliani-Miller essentially said that how a company is funded, whether through debt or equity, doesn't change the fundamental value of the firm.
It's like cutting a pizza. Whether you slice the pizza into 4 big slices or 8 small slices, you still have the exact same amount of pizza.
Exactly. Academia said the capital structure doesn't change the pizza. But BCG proved that in the real cutthroat world, debt is a weapon.
How does a weapon work?
Debt gives you an endless fire hose of instant cash. You use that cash to expand your operations faster than anyone else. You buy more land, you build more factories. That rapid expansion pushes you down the experience curve faster than your rivals.
Your accumulated volume doubles. Your costs systematically drop.
Your costs drop. You crush your rivals with lower prices. You steal their market share. And the massive profits from your new monopoly easily pay off the interest on the debt.
It's an aggressive corporate war machine. You integrate debt, pricing, and market share into one relentless, self-feeding engine.
It completely defied the cautious, conservative management style of the past.
But listen closely to this. If you are listening to this right now, this is the exact moment in history where corporations became hopelessly addicted to leverage. This is the seed of future financial panics, borrowing to the hilt to fund hypergrowth.
It was incredibly effective in the short term, but it raised a huge existential question for massive conglomerates.
Great question.
If you're a massive company with a dozen different business divisions, you make paper, you make chemicals, you make tools, and you are borrowing all this cash from the bank, well, where do you put it? Which division gets the fire hose of money?
Enter the most famous square in business history.
The matrix.
The epiphany at Mead Paper. I want you to imagine your company has a division that is number 2 in an exploding, fast-growing market. Everyone is excited, sales are up. Should you pour all your newly borrowed cash into it to help it grow?
The matrix says, absolutely not. That is financial suicide.
That feels entirely wrong. It's growing fast, the market is hot. Why wouldn't I invest my money there?
Because of the underlying cash flow dynamic, Zakon and the BCG team invented the growth share matrix to solve this exact capital allocation problem for Mead Paper.
4 simple boxes on a whiteboard. Stars, cash cows, dogs, and question marks. Let's break them down, because this framework secretly runs the world.
It maps 2 specific things on an axis. Market growth is the industry expanding, and market share, are you the biggest player? Let's start with the most important box, the cash cow. High market share, but in a slow-growing, boring market.
Like selling regular industrial grinding wheels or standard white printer paper.
Right. Because you have high market share, you are at the bottom of the experience curve. Your costs are incredibly low. And because the market is slow and boring, you don't need to invest much in new factories or R&D. So what happens?
It just sits there and spits out massive, reliable amounts of cash every single quarter.
Exactly. Now, what do you do with that cash?
You milk the cow. You take all that cash away from the boring paper division and you feed it to the stars.
The stars. High market share in a fast-growing market.
They are the glamorous future of the company.
They are the future, yes. But fast growth is violently expensive. You have to build new plants, hire new people, run massive ad campaigns. They consume cash much faster than they generate it. You have to feed them constantly with the cow's milk just to maintain that dominant share against competitors.
So the boring, stable business actively funds the exciting, risky business. Okay, what about the question marks?
Low market share in a fast-growing market. These are the danger zones. You have to make a ruthless decision. Do we pour an absolute fortune of cow cash into them to aggressively turn them into stars? Or do we kill them entirely? There is no middle ground.
And finally, the most brutal box of all, the dogs. Low market share in a slow market.
They don't make much cash. They don't use much cash. They are just existing, treading water. The Matrix says, get rid of them, sell them, close them, fire everyone.
This matrix changed everything. It shifted the entire philosophical view of what a corporation actually is. You stop thinking of yourself as a proud maker of products. You are now a highly fluid portfolio of capital.
You are no longer a manufacturer. You are an investment manager.
Let me push back on this. You stop caring about making great paper. You treat your own departments like a stable of racehorses. You shoot the slow ones, you milk the steady ones, and you bet the entire farm on the fast ones. Even if the dog division is making a tiny profit, you kill it. Why?
Opportunity cost. The capital tied up in the dog could be deployed to feed a star. To a strategist, a slow dollar is a dead dollar.
It is brilliant logic. It is mathematically elegant. Treating businesses like abstract dots on a matrix is incredibly efficient.
Until you remember one tiny, incredibly messy detail.
Human beings work inside those dots.
The dog manager's protest.
Imagine waking up one morning, going to work, and being told that your life's work, your team, your product, your daily grind is officially classified by a bunch of 25-year-old consultants with MBAs as a dog.
It created a nightmare of human resistance.
This matrix centralized power in the hands of a few elites at the very top of the corporate pyramid, but it violently stripped the dignity away from thousands of middle managers.
We call this the Jungian shadow of strategy.
The repressed human element. The ghost in the machine.
The strategy models were clean, rational, and perfect on paper. But humans are emotional, proud, and messy. BCG practiced what people on the ground started calling seagull consulting.
Seagull consulting, I know exactly what this is. The consultants fly in from Boston, squawk a lot, drop a massive, messy strategy document on your head, and then immediately fly away.
And they leave the devastated middle managers to clean up the mess.
It is fantasy football management. You cannot look a guy in the eye, tell him he is fundamentally useless, classify his entire division as a dog to be sold off, and then expect him to enthusiastically execute his own firing.
And they didn't, because the strategy completely ignored human emotion. The actual execution rate of these brilliant, mathematically perfect plans plummeted. By some estimates from the era, fewer than 10% of these strategies were ever fully implemented.
The humans rebelled. The perfect spreadsheets met the messy reality of the factory floor.
And while BCG was busy ignoring human emotions and dealing with failed execution, one of their own rising stars was ignoring corporate loyalty. He was plotting the ultimate betrayal.
The traitor, Bill Bain.
Exclusive strategy.
In the elite consulting world, selling the exact same secret weapon to two bitter rivals is just considered good business.
BCG would happily advise Ford on how to beat General Motors on Monday and then advise General Motors on how to beat Ford on Tuesday.
But Bill Bain looked at that model and called it shameless treason.
Bain was BCG's best salesman. He had an incredible magnetic charm. He could talk a CEO into anything. But he realized BCG's underlying model was deeply flawed. By selling the exact same experience curve ideas to everyone in the industry, they were essentially neutralizing their own advice. They were selling out their own clients.
Right. If everyone has the super weapon, no one has the advantage.
Exactly. So, in 1973, Bain orchestrates a mass exodus. He takes BCG's absolute best people, walks out the door, and founds Bain & Company.
And he founds this new firm on one absolute unbreakable rule: exclusivity.
Bain told his clients, we only work for one company per industry, period.
He also changed how they billed. He didn't want to charge an hourly rate. He said, we don't bill by the hour, we sell profits at a discount.
That is such an arrogant, incredible flex.
He didn't want to just hand over a binder of advice and fly away like a seagull. He wanted his client to be the unquestioned dominant king of their competitive universe, and he wanted to turn every other competitor into terrified peasants.
That is ice cold. That's not traditional consulting.
No, that is hiring a corporate hitman who signs a blood oath never to work for the mob boss across the street.
And to make a client a true king, Bain realized he had to go to terrifying, almost obsessive lengths regarding data collection.
Reverse engineering. The cold data.
Let me ask you, to utterly destroy your enemy, how deeply do you need to know them?
Bain's answer: you need to know the exact cost of the screws falling on their factory floor.
Let's look at a classic, legendary Bain operation from the 1980s. The client is Bausch & Lomb, the contact lens maker. They were locked in a brutal, margin-crushing fight with a rival named CooperVision.
Bausch & Lomb brings in Bain. They hand over a massive check and say, destroy them.
To destroy them, Bain needs to figure out CooperVision's exact, absolute bottom dollar production costs. But CooperVision isn't going to just hand over their internal spreadsheets to a rival.
But what does Bain do? This story is straight out of a Cold War spy movie.
Well, CooperVision had just opened a brand new, state-of-the-art manufacturing plant in England. It just so happens that the Queen Mother recently took a highly publicized ceremonial tour of that exact plant. And the BBC filmed it.
The BBC broadcast the tour on public television.
Bain gets a copy of the tape. They put their analysts in a room. They freeze-frame the video. They blow up the footage. They zoom in so closely on the background that they can read the tiny manufacturer nameplates bolted onto the heavy machinery.
You are kidding. They identified the machines from a blurry TV broadcast.
Not kidding. Once they have the brand names and model numbers of the lathes and presses, the Bain consultants get on the phone. They call the equipment vendors posing as potential buyers. They ask, hey, we are interested in buying this exact lathe. What is the power draw? What is the maintenance schedule? How many units can it output per hour?
Oh my God. That is insane.
They calculate the electricity. They calculate the labor required to run it. They reverse engineer the entire enemy factory, machine by machine, on a massive spreadsheet.
They calculated the exact cost of the competitor's factory without ever setting foot inside the building.
It is greater Taylorism taken to the absolute terrifying extreme.
Let's explain Taylorism for a second. Taylorism was the old 1920s idea of standing on a factory floor and timing your own workers with a stopwatch to make them move faster. This is greater Taylorism. This is timing your enemy's machines from across the ocean using television tapes.
Strategy wasn't just high-level matrix theories and whiteboard dots anymore. It was microscopic, intrusive data collection.
And it worked.
Flawlessly. Because Bain knew exactly what CooperVision's break-even point was, Bausch & Lomb knew exactly how far they could drop their own prices to bleed them dry without bleeding themselves. Bausch & Lomb used that data to secure a 50% cost advantage. They crushed them.
If you are listening to this, you should feel a chill right now. This is the exact moment in history where corporate surveillance, hyper-competition, and data weaponization became the absolute norm. The stakes just went through the roof.
And while BCG and Bain were playing hyper-aggressive 3D chess with BBC spy tapes and debt formulas, what was the oldest, most prestigious consulting firm in the world doing?
McKinsey & Company, the titans.
They were practically asleep at the wheel.
McKinsey's awakening. The rocket scientists' counterattack.
BCG and Bain are actively conquering the globe with fierce math and corporate espionage. McKinsey is coasting. They're moving boxes around on organizational charts, adjusting reporting structures, and relying on their old money reputation.
They were doing what they politely call general management audits.
Polite, gentlemanly advice. You know, perhaps the VP of marketing should report to the COO. It was entirely qualitative.
Until Fred Gluck arrived.
Gluck was a massive shock to the aristocratic McKinsey system. He was a rough Brooklyn-born engineer. He previously worked at Bell Labs. He was a literal rocket scientist. He didn't care about Harvard pedigrees or gentlemanly handshakes. He cared about hard data.
He looks around the McKinsey offices and he is appalled. There is no intellectual rigor. There is no competitive edge. They are losing ground to Henderson and Bain.
Gluck decides he has to weaponize McKinsey. He brings in hard, brutal, quantitative analysis. He demands a culture of fierce, almost hostile internal debate. He wants to drag McKinsey out of the polite dark ages and transform it into a strategy armory.
So McKinsey was the old money aristocrat, sipping tea in a leather chair. Gluck was the street fighter who kicked in the door and taught them how to use brass knuckles.
But changing McKinsey was not easy. How do you force a room full of incredibly arrogant, highly paid partners to change their entire worldview? They already think they are the smartest men on earth.
You throw a party.
A very specific kind of party.
How do you brainwash the world's most egotistical consultants? You lock them in a room by a gorgeous lake in Switzerland, supply plenty of alcohol, and hit them with relentless, brutal logic.
Gluck organized massive mandatory seminars in Vevey, Switzerland. He forced the partners to establish what he called a knowledge culture. He made them share data instead of hoarding it.
He stood up at the front of the room and mapped out the future. He showed them that strategy was evolving. It wasn't just basic financial forecasting anymore.
He mapped a 4-stage evolution, from basic financial planning to forecast-based planning to externally oriented planning, and finally, the holy grail, strategic management.
What does strategic management actually mean for the client paying the bill?
It means strategy is no longer a one-time 6-month project. You don't just hire a consultant to fix a broken supply chain and then say goodbye.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Strategy becomes a permanent state of corporate anxiety. It is a constant, unending process of managing the portfolio, scanning for threats, and reevaluating the matrix.
This is genius. Evil, but genius. Gluck realized that if strategy is a permanent state of being, then the billing is permanent.
Exactly. Strategy became an endless subscription service. The goalposts were permanently moved. You are never done being strategic. There is always another competitor to analyze, another matrix to draw.
The consulting firms had successfully conquered the corporate boardroom. They had unlimited access, unlimited data, and unlimited billing. But the strategy revolution wasn't finished. It was about to conquer the ivory tower of academia.
The ivory tower subverter, Michael Porter.
He wrote the most famous, best-selling strategy book in history, Competitive Strategy. It is on the shelf of every CEO in the world.
But the crazy part of the story, Porter almost didn't get tenure at Harvard Business School. The old guard professors absolutely hated his ideas.
Why? Because what Porter did was incredibly audacious. Some might say unethical.
He took a very specific branch of economics called industrial organization, or IO.
Let's explain IO. What was it originally used for?
Historically, government regulators and policymakers used IO models to identify monopolies. It was a framework to spot anti-competitive behavior so the government could break up trusts and protect consumers.
It was a tool designed to stop bad guys. It was the police manual for catching bank robbers.
Porter took this anti-monopoly framework and completely flipped it upside down. He reverse-engineered it.
He taught massive corporations how to use those exact same regulatory frameworks to build monopolies.
That is exactly what he did. He showed companies how to find the perfect, most lucrative positioning against their suppliers, against their buyers, and against their rivals. He gave them the academic blueprint for total market domination.
That is supervillain behavior. He literally took the manual on how to catch a bank robber and sold it at a massive premium to the bank robbers.
And Porter's first major rule of corporate robbery was simple, mathematical, and brutal. Be extreme or be dead.
Generic strategies.
In normal life, being average is usually fine. You blend in, you are safe, you do okay.
In Porter's business world, being average is a mathematical death sentence.
Porter defined the generic strategies. He said every company essentially only has 2 real choices if they want to survive. Choice 1, be the absolute low-cost leader, the cheapest of the cheap, squeeze every penny out of the supply chain.
Choice 2, be highly differentiated, a premium niche, the most expensive, the most unique, the highest quality.
But what if you are in the middle? What if you offer an okay product at an okay price? A perfectly reasonable compromise.
Porter called that being stuck in the middle. And he mathematically proved that it guarantees low profitability and eventual death.
If you are stuck in the middle, you will be crushed from below by the ruthless cheap guys, and you will be outshined from above by the glamorous premium guys. You must choose an extreme.
Let's look around at the world today. This specific theory perfectly explains the modern retail apocalypse. Porter wrote this code in 1980, and we are walking through the wreckage of it right now.
Why do Dollar General and Walmart survive on one end, And why do Louis Vuitton and Apple thrive on the other end?
But Sears, JCPenney, Macy's, and the entire middle-tier American shopping mall all die?
Because they were stuck in the middle. They didn't choose an extreme. The mathematical models of strategy forbid their survival.
To execute these extremes, Porter introduced another concept. It is arguably the most famous diagram in business history. But the way he introduced it involved a massive, petty academic snub.
The value chain. The grudge in the footnote.
Porter's value chain is legendary. It is taught in literally every business school on Earth. But the secret history? It was actually inspired by an internal sketch made by McKinsey consultants.
McKinsey had done the early grinding legwork on mapping out what they called business systems. Porter took the core idea, refined it, packaged it brilliantly, and completely dismissed McKinsey's prior work with a single tiny footnote buried in his book.
That is academic cold-blooded murder.
But the tool itself, the value chain, was absolutely devastating to the traditional concept of a company. It breaks a corporation down into discrete, entirely separate activities: inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing, service.
Why is this so powerful? It just sounds like a flowchart.
Because it is the ultimate scalpel of greater Taylorism. Before the value chain, a company was viewed as a single, living, breathing organism. The marketing guys talked to the operations guys in the cafeteria. Porter sliced the organism into separate, isolated pieces.
And once it is sliced into pieces, management can ruthlessly analyze the cost of every single microstep.
They can look at the chain and ask, are we the absolute best in the world at inbound logistics? No. Then fire the logistics team and outsource it to a trucking company. Are we the absolute cheapest at IT operations? No. Move the entire department to another country.
It stopped being a unified company. It became a Lego set. Management could just pop off any block, throw to the trash, and snap on a cheaper block from halfway across the world.
The financial efficiency skyrocketed, profit margins exploded, but the soul of the company, the loyalty, the shared culture was permanently fractured.
Let me talk directly to the listener for a second. If you have ever worked at a company where your IT department was suddenly outsourced to a contractor, or your HR department was replaced by a frustrating automated web portal, you are a direct victim of Porter's value chain. You were a Lego block that got popped off.
And as millions of workers were chopped into data points and outsourced value chains, someone finally stood up and screamed.
Someone finally screamed for the human beings being crushed in the gears of this massive mathematical machine.
The forgotten shadow. Tom Peters.
The populist cry.
While the elites at BCG, Bain, McKinsey, and Harvard were obsessing over matrices, value chains, and cost curves, Tom Peters yelled, "An organization chart is not a company. What about the people?"
Peters was actually a McKinsey consultant, but he was pushed out. He didn't fit their new hard data, rocket scientist mold. He cared too much about culture.
So he takes his ideas and writes a book called In Search of Excellence. He introduces a counter framework, the 7S framework. Instead of just looking at strategy and structure, he focuses on shared values, skills, style, staff, soft things, human things.
He passionately argued that cold, hard strategy completely ignored the reality of execution. It ignored corporate culture. It ignored human emotion and pride. A spreadsheet cannot make a tired, stressed worker care about the quality of their work.
The public reaction was absolutely explosive. The book sold 6 million copies.
It was a massive populist uprising against the spreadsheet elites. Middle managers everywhere bought it. They felt seen. They felt validated.
But here is the profound tragedy of Tom Peters. Everyone bought the book. Everyone agreed with it in principle.
And then what happened?
Absolutely nothing. The ruthless strategy machine kept rolling right over them. The elites read the book, nodded politely at the importance of culture, and went right back to their value chains and cost-cutting matrices.
Why? If everyone knew the human element mattered, why did the math win?
Because the math was too profitable to ignore in the short term. Wall Street rewarded the cost-cutting. They didn't reward the shared values. The human shadow was momentarily acknowledged and then promptly shoved back into the dark.
But what if the elites and their perfect math were fundamentally wrong about how real, lasting success actually happens?
The Honda effect. Design versus accident.
We all know the story of Honda motorcycles. In the 1960s, they came to America and completely conquered the market. BCG wrote a brilliant, widely circulated, highly praised report on exactly how Honda did it.
BCG claimed it was a masterful, premeditated strategic strike. They said Honda used the experience curve perfectly. They intentionally drove down costs on large motorcycles to systematically crush the British and American manufacturers.
A perfect mathematical chess match. It validated everything Henderson taught.
Until an academic named Richard Pascal decided to actually investigate the story. He didn't just read the financial charts. He flew to Japan. He interviewed the actual Honda executives who were on the ground in America during the launch.
And what did Pascal find out?
The truth was a comedy of errors. It wasn't a chess match. Honda's strategy was a complete disaster. Their big bikes were failing miserably in America. The engines were breaking down. They were leaking oil. They were losing money.
So how did they accidentally conquer the market?
The Honda employees in Los Angeles had brought over these tiny 50cc bikes called Super Cubs. They didn't plan to sell them. They just brought them to run personal errands around LA because they were cheap on gas. They were riding them in the dirt, having fun on the weekends.
And Americans saw them having fun.
Exactly. Americans saw these little bikes and wanted to buy them. Sears expressed interest in selling them.
The public organically demanded the Super Cubs.
And here is the kicker. Honda headquarters in Japan actually resisted selling them. They were embarrassed by the small bikes. They wanted to be known for big, tough motorcycles. But the American demand was so overwhelmingly high, they finally gave in. The massive success of Honda was a complete stumbling, lucky accident.
Wait, so these highly paid consultants are basically just expensive historians. They look at a guy who wins the lottery by picking the number 7, and they write a 50-page mathematical report proving that picking 7 was a strategic inevitability.
It sparked a massive, brutal debate in academia. Is strategy a perfect design created by geniuses in a boardroom? Or is it just stumbling around in the dark, making mistakes, and getting lucky enough to evolve?
The Honda effect proves the models aren't perfect. They suffer from survivorship bias. But despite these massive, glaring flaws in the logic, the strategy machine found a new, utterly terrifying master in the 1980s.
Shareholder supremacy. The barbarians are at the gate.
We have to ask a fundamental philosophical question. Why does your company exist? Does it exist to make great products? Does it exist to provide stable jobs for the local community? Does it exist to innovate?
In the 1980s, Wall Street provided a brutal, absolute mathematical answer: no.
Your company exists strictly to print money for the shareholders, period.
We saw the rise of high-yield junk bonds, leveraged buyouts, or LBOs, led by firms like KKR. The concept of economic value added.
Strategy mutated. It was no longer about beating a competitor. The ultimate singular goal became elevating the stock price by any means necessary.
Strategy was fully weaponized by corporate raiders. They would use junk bonds to forcibly buy a company. Then they would use the BCG matrices and Porter's value chains to carve the company up into pieces.
They fired thousands of workers. They extracted the cash. If a division wasn't earning its exact cost of capital, it was amputated immediately. No sentimentality, no loyalty.
This is when the fiercening of capitalism reached its absolute peak. This is the era that permanently locked in the anxiety of the modern worker that we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive.
You're no longer a valued employee building a legacy. You are only as valuable as your daily measurable contribution to the quarterly stock price.
But playing this hyper-aggressive, leveraged game of money and power eventually burned the very people who designed the game.
The Icarus Crisis. Bain's Guinness disaster.
What happens when the elite consultants who pull the strings get too arrogant? What happens when they decide they don't just want to advise the king, they want to be the king?
You get the biggest fraud in British business history.
Bain and Company was flying incredibly high. They were making millions. They get deeply involved with Guinness, the legendary beer company. Guinness is trying to execute a massive, highly contested corporate takeover of another beverage company.
But Bain crosses an invisible ethical line. They stop just giving PowerPoint advice. They basically start running the takeover operation themselves.
They get their hands dirty. They cross from advisory into aggressive execution.
Very dirty. It leads to a massive illegal stock manipulation scandal. They artificially inflated Guinness's share price to win the takeover battle.
It completely explodes. The CEO of Guinness, Ernest Saunders, actually goes to prison for fraud.
And a top Bain executive, Olivier Roux, is deeply implicated. He is forced to testify. The curtain is pulled back on the dark arts of strategy.
The scandal almost completely destroys Bain and Company. Clients flee. The puppet masters got hopelessly tangled in their own strings. They flew way too close to the sun.
It actually leads to the founder, Bill Bain himself, being ousted from his own firm.
The Lords of Strategy survived that scandal. They reorganized, laid low, and kept going. The machine was too big to stop. But years later, their entire worldview, this hyper-optimized, debt-fueled, perfectly calculated matrix, would collide with reality on a catastrophic global scale.
The final question Is history repeating itself?
In 2008, a massive financial tsunami wiped out the global economy. Trillions of dollars vanished overnight. Millions of people lost their homes.
And we have to ask, where were the strategic geniuses? Where were the perfectly balanced matrices? Why are the smartest men in the room completely silent as the entire world burned down?
The 2008 collapse proved the massive, fatal blind spot of the entire 50-year strategy revolution.
What was the blind spot? What did the models miss?
They had spent 50 years slicing the world into perfect, isolated, competitive models. They measured every screw, every cent, every fractional drop in the experience curve. They maximized leverage to fund growth, but they completely failed to calculate systemic risk. They optimized the parts, but they broke the whole.
Connect the dots for us. What does that mean in plain English?
The machine they built, hyper-efficient, highly leveraged, addicted to debt, relentlessly cutting costs, completely ignoring human resilience and margin for error, had zero shock absorbers.
It was wound too tight.
Exactly. The quantitative analysts, the quants, took over the financial system using the exact same logic Henderson and Bain pioneered. Maximize leverage, minimize waste. But when one small piece of the global system broke the subprime mortgage market, the mathematical models couldn't adapt. They completely broke reality.
We built a race car that can go 300 miles an hour. It looks absolutely amazing on a spreadsheet. It generates incredible short-term profits. But we forgot to install a steering wheel. And we completely forgot the brakes.
Which brings us to the most provocative extrapolation of all. Look at where we're sitting right now today.
Face to face with the artificial intelligence revolution, geopolitical chaos, supply chain fragility, extreme social and economic divides.
Are we relying on the exact same flawed, hyper-optimized models to navigate this terrifying new era? When an AI algorithm tells a CEO to amputate 20% of their workforce because the Matrix says they are a dog division, are we just running the 1960s faster?
Are we locking ourselves into a new, even faster doom loop?
That is the ultimate question. Have we learned anything from the human shadow? Or are we just speeding up the treadmill until it breaks again?
We have traced the invention of the modern corporate world. We started at Bruce Henderson's single desk with no telephone. We walked through the brutal calculator price wars, the invention of the Matrix, the corporate hitmen of Bain, the value chains of Harvard, all the way to the 2008 global financial crisis.
We have decoded the secret intellectual history of the corporate world.
The next time you are sitting at your desk, overwhelmed, feeling like just a disposable number on a spreadsheet, the next time you wonder why your company is making a bizarre, ruthless decision that makes absolutely zero human sense.
Remember this deep dive. Take a breath. It is not personal. You are just living inside the mathematical code written by the lords of strategy 50 years ago.
You are inside the Matrix. But now, you know how it works. You can see the code.
Which leaves you with one final, crucial challenge.
Tell them.
If your entire career, your salary, and your stress levels are being dictated by these 50-year-old matrices and value chains, how do you design a personal strategy to break out of the box? Look at your own life and your own career right now. Are you a star? Are you a cash cow being milked dry by someone else to fund their growth? Or are you ready to become the attacker?
The machine is running. The game is being played whether you want to participate or not. It's up to you how you play your hand.
We hope you take these tools and use them to your advantage.
We will see you out there. Keep questioning the code.